Welcome to another Triple Play Fantasy in 15. Today we're going to talk about Kawhi Leonard and what his decision holds. Now, news broke recently that Kawhi Leonard had surgery to repair a partial tear in his right ACL. This was originally diagnosed as a right knee sprain, but figure it is a more serious injury as Kawhi Leonard missed the last 8 games in the playoffs. Now, he has a big decision upcoming for his free agency. He has a player option coming up, and Kevin and I are going to discuss whether he should stay with the Clippers or go to another team. And for me, I think it's a no-brainer that he stays with the Clippers. Now, we look at the financial implications. Kawhi Leonard is 30 years old. He has a player option for $36 million this upcoming season, which means he can take his time recovering from surgery and still get paid a decent amount. I mean, $36 million, I think that's in the top 10 of the NBA salary, so it's something that he's earned. If he signs that player option, he is then eligible for a 4-year, $181 million extension that kicks in 2022 to the 2023 season. That means that it'll expire the deal will run up when he's 35 years old. And between his player option and those 2 years, he'll be making over $200 million. So once again, it's not the Supermax, but it's essentially a 5-year deal that is the Supermax. Now, if he declines, he has no bird rights, and the most he can make from another team is 4-year, $176.2 million. So he's foregoing about $30-something million. Next, I want to look at Kawhi Leonard's injury history, because this isn't his first lower leg or lower body issue he's had. In 2017, he had right knee quadriceps tendinopathy, which basically is a breakdown of the collagen. Now, collagen is the most abundant protein in your body. It is kind of what connects your muscles, really kind of gives you that explosiveness. And in 2017, he also had a right knee quad hematoma, which is a contusion or a bruise. That is basically why he played 9 games that season. That was the whole issue with the Spurs medical team. He felt like they misdiagnosed him. It was kind of a question mark of what happened at the time, but now we understand the significance of it. In 2018 with the Raptors, he had left knee patellar tendinopathy as well. So he's had leg or knee issues with both ones. And this limited his ability to play back-to-back games. Obviously, Toronto ended up winning the championship, but they weren't the dominant team throughout that year. Now, I look at Kawhi Leonard's injury history, or his playing career. He's played 576 games. Now, if you take out the 9 games he played in the 2017-2018 season with the Spurs, he's played 567 in 9 years, which is about 63 per season. So that's a decent amount. Now, you also factor in that he has playoff experience, which is an additional 138 games. So that's about another 1.5 years on his belt. Next, I want to look at his minutes per game. For his career, Kawhi Leonard has averaged about 30 minutes per game. Last year with the Clippers, he actually averaged the most minutes that he's had per his career, which is 34.1, which sounds like a lot, but it's not even 3/4 of the game that he's playing. So he is someone that has experienced load manage a lot. I know what a lot of people are saying. Hey, Kevin Durant had an Achilles tear, and he got signed to a max contract as well. Well, him and Kyrie plan to have a super team together. Kevin Durant is also a 6'10" sniper with an NBA frame that we've really never seen before. Now, ironically, him and Kawhi Leonard shoot the same percentage from 3, 38.4% for their career. Kevin Durant has made over 1,650, while Kawhi Leonard is at 865. So there is a large sample size. I think if you're Kawhi Leonard, you've won a couple rings. Nobody is going to question your legacy like they might Paul George. The Clippers were in the Western Conference Finals. They beat a Utah team that was the #1 seed in the Western Conference. I think Kawhi needs to stay. It's the best financial decision, and it's probably going to give him the best decision to win a championship.
All right. Well, now that I get to talk, I do appreciate you learning how to say all those words, because that must have been tough for you. You must have been practicing all day.
Yeah,
Okay,
I was in a mirror.
Okay, a couple of things. First of all, I think you bring up good points about the money. I think the injury changes a little thing, because I think if he didn't get injured and they lost, I think maybe it would have been more of like, okay, maybe I need to reevaluate. But I do want to go on the other side. Like, if he does leave, you brought up Kevin Durant, so I was going to mention that, and you already did. But the whole idea is like, yeah, he could still get a deal, sit out half the year somewhere else. And I think that some people like that extra money, but LeBron's always been that guy that signs those 2-year deals and hasn't really cared about bird rights. Chris Paul might even be leaving after this year. The Suns, he might actually opt out of like $40 million. So like, these guys have these weird brands. The only thing is Kawhi's from LA. So I do realize like he's got that hometown thing going on, but I want to give a couple arguments for why he could leave. First of all, Paul George is ass. I don't care what you say, Eric. Like, Paul George is not a number 2 guy that he wants to play with. He saw it in the playoffs. I know he played better, but I just don't see him looking at Paul George. He's now played him for 2 years. Does he think that's going to be his guy that can get him over the hump? I would say no. Like, if I'm Kawhi, I'm looking at that area, and he's making $39 million next year. Think of that. And then he'll be making $48 million in 2024. Paul George. So when you're looking at the numbers and you're looking at kind of what you're looking at, the overall outlook of that team, it worries me a little bit. They're paying Marcus Morris $15 million this year, $16 next year, and $17 that following year, and Patrick Beverley $14 million next year. So when you look at what they can do with that roster, there's not a lot they're going to be able to do next year. I mean, Luke Kennard, and I love him, Duke guy, my guy, making $12 million right now. Like, that is insane. So I feel like the salary, if he looks at the salary, the maneuverability, do they think that they can kind of move some guys around? I get a little nervous about that because of that, the money they have tied up in a lot of these guys. Even Zubac's making $7.5 million. So from a salary perspective, I'm from what they can build around him, I'm worried about that. What do you think about that roster? Because Serge Ibaka also has a $9 million player option that he's probably going to opt into, because no one's paying Serge Ibaka $9 million. So I'm just worried that they're cap strapped. There's not a lot of things they can maneuver around.
No, you're right. And I think the Clippers are in a win now mode where, look, you're right. They've given out a lot of these contracts. I think, and look, Paul George, prior to this playoffs, deserved all the blame in the world. Pandemic P, playoff P, that was a real thing. But I think he showed that he's not worth the contract that he signed, because it was a massive one worth over $220 million. But I think Paul George can be the number 2 option on a championship team. And I think a lot of the teams in the West aren't as scary anymore. The Warriors aren't contenders like they were. We'll see next year if Klay comes back healthy. I think the Lakers championship window is closing drastically. I mean, they beat the Jazz in 6 games, and a healthy Jazz team. Donovan Mitchell, I know he had the ankle injury, but he looked perfectly fine in the playoffs. I think Phoenix got hot at the right time, but I think the Clippers could have beat anybody in that conference, and I think they could have challenged the Bucks. So I think this is a team that probably has a year or 2 left to win a championship window. I just don't see another team that he can go to that would be a threat that like the Clippers would for the next 2-3 years.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I have some teams that I think that maybe he can opt out. And again, I didn't really take a look at too much of the salary cap stuff, but the salary cap's a myth. Like, if a guy wants to go to a certain team, he'll figure it out and go there. So there are some teams that I think are interesting spots. Now, the first team I want to look at is the Knicks. And again, I'm going to have Eric tell me why I'm wrong, but I'm not. But the whole idea here is, like, I think that the Knicks could be interesting going there with Tibbs. I don't know how him and Tibbs would do, because Tibbs makes him play hard, and Kawhi's not a big guy, and it's a bigger market. But it is an interesting kind of dynamic. You put him in there with those young pieces, Julius Randle, Barrett, all those guys. Could he lead the Knicks to a championship? And then, you know what? These guys care about their legacy. Knicks championship, Kawhi leading him to a championship in the Eastern Conference. Maybe you can get by those guys in the East. I think that is an interesting legacy move. Now, will it happen? I don't know. I think this is the outlier. I just want to throw it in here. But you can't tell me that it's not an interesting move for them maybe to go to the Knicks, win a championship in New York.
So I love the Knicks as a landing spot, but I don't think it happens for the reasons you said for Thibodeau. Thibodeau typically grinds his players, which is against Kawhi's load management. I also think Kawhi has shown that he can do that. He went to Toronto for 1 year, won the championship. Of course, that iconic shot against Philly where it bounced around the rim. I also think Kawhi likes to avoid those bigger markets. That's why he went to the Clippers instead of the Lakers. I also could see him saying, hey, look, I don't want to get involved with an owner like James Dolan. I know that's turned a lot of players off from signing with the Knicks just because of the bad reputation he has. From a basketball standpoint, I love it, but I think there's just so many other kind of details that go with it that Kawhi would spur from signing there, pun intended.
Oh, look at you. So good. He's so good with words on this channel. Now, my next guy, I think this is a slam dunk, Miami, and I had to get my Miami Vice in there. Him, Jimmy, together, I think they play very well together. They use it at this point in their careers. I think him a bit with Bam there, having those three superstars. That team, just by will, defensively, I think they could be an excellent team, one of the best teams in the East defensively. I love for him to go there. And I think they can make it work with some contracts that they have if they can move around. Like those three pieces there, that's a team I'd rather have than Paul George and Marcus Morris.
So Miami was on my second one. So my concerns about Miami is, like you said, the contract. Jimmy Butler is also an alpha, which I think him and Kawhi, when things are going well, they're going to be good, but they could also butt heads. Miami also traded for Victor Oladipo, and obviously he's having a knee procedure done as well. But that's something where I believe they traded for him because they wanted to sign him to an extension. And you look at how many games Miami has played in the last couple of years, they might have hit their peak. We saw that they did not look like the same team in the playoffs this year. They played a ridiculous amount of basketball in a short period of time, and you have to wonder if that's going to impact them mentally and physically as well.
Yeah, I do think that, like Jimmy, when he plays, and I think this is why he struggled with like Simmons. He wants dudes that want to ball and be there. I think Kawhi has that. I don't think he outwardly does it. Like I understand that perspective. I do think that. Yeah, they did trade for Oladipo, but if you can get Kawhi Leonard, Oladipo can go play for the Pacers or something again. Like that's not a big deal. Like, hey, Oladipo, it was cool. I'm glad you were here. But I do think Miami would be an interesting spot because they could challenge the East realistically, right away. Like that team would be right in the mix, if not one of the best teams in the East. So I do think that would be a good spot for him. And I'm going to give you one more, and this is my kind of fun spot. And I know I don't know if they like each other very much, but could you imagine pairing Luka with Kawhi? And there's been rumors about it. Like people are saying it, like all the Dallas beat writers, like I'm not just pulling this out of my ass, I promise. Like the Dallas beat writers say that is their number one target is Kawhi Leonard. Imagine actually filling some pieces around him. They could get rid of Porzingis. They can trade that contract or maybe keep him if they can maneuver a little bit. Imagine having Luka and Kawhi there. And from Kawhi's perspective, you get to go play with a young superstar. You don't have to really be that dude anymore. I don't know if he necessarily needs to. He can do that load management that he likes. And in those pieces in the West, imagine pairing these two guys together. They're a championship contender instantly.
So here's my thing with Dallas is you're not going to find somebody to take Porzingis' contract off the books. You might be able to do a buyout. And
they traded John Wall. What are you talking about? John Wall got traded. Westbrook got traded.
Yeah. They got traded for each other's contracts. It was a point guard swap. You rarely ever see that. So here's my thing. They're going to have to sign Luka. And you figure Luka is going to probably have the richest contract in NBA history when eventually he signs. So you have to get creative then with either trading Porzingis and assets for somebody to take his contract off the books, or you have to get creative with a buyout. But then I'm worried about the roster behind that. You have Maxi Kleber, you have Jalen Brunson, you have Tim Hardaway Jr. I don't think that makes you a contender, especially with Kawhi's load management. I think if anything, it puts more pressure on Luka, who already has an extremely high usage rate. I think you're just grinding Luka more and more into the ground, the games that Kawhi doesn't play, because I don't think you can keep him, Porzingis, and Luka all together. Or sign Kawhi, keep Porzingis and Luka.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the problem is with Kawhi, no one knows what he thinks. Like no one really knows no one knows what he's doing. And he was sitting up there and in the stands and he watched his team lose and they came very close. But you know that I thought the Jazz were frauds for all season. Like that series did not surprise me that they won that series. Can they do it next year with a healthy Anthony Davis on the Lakers? You're going to see some turmoil there, some changeover. The Nuggets have been impressive there. I put the Nuggets down, but I don't think he's going to go there because he doesn't want to go to Denver. Like I feel like those three teams I gave are probably the likely landing spots for a guy like Kawhi. I don't know. I'm interested to see what he's going to do. I could see him. Realistically, I'd say it's like 80-20. He stays. But that 20%, I could see one of those teams being, hey, intriguing, legacy-wise. Hey, I can go somewhere and be the guy that wins the Knicks championship. But, that's kind of my final thoughts. Do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think his injury changed everything. In December, He said, right now, if it's up to me, I'm not signing the player option, but I'm focused on this season, and that's what I'm here for. Obviously, an injury changes a lot. You're right. Kawhi is probably one of the toughest players to read. Who knows? Kawhi could be thinking the Knicks. He could be thinking another team. Maybe he decides to retire. Let us know what you think in the comments, if Kawhi is going to stay or if he's going to leave. And make sure you catch us on some future episodes.